What if what truly reveals a man isn't what he says, does, or promises, but rather what emerges from the void when she's no longer there? What if her absence is the mirror he's always avoided looking at? The raw, naked reflection, unfiltered and unmasked. There's something that only reveals itself when the feminine withdraws. Something primal, unavoidable. A silence that screams truths no presence would ever dare name. For so long, we've been taught to measure love by touch, by presence, by the frequency of messages, or by the intensity of glances. But what happens when all this ceases? When she falls silent and disappears? Most believe that's when love dies. But what if that's precisely where truth is born? When there's no more applause, no more audience, just him alone, staring at the rubble of what he failed to care for. Perhaps what scares a man most isn't her departure, but what wells up within him after her departure. What moves in the shadows of absence? The confusion between longing and wounded ego, between genuine love and narcissistic need. It's not about her after all, it's about what she carried with her. The compass, the axis, the symbol of completeness. And when that symbol disappears, who does he become? Nothing opens the male soul more than the space left by a woman who once inhabited everything. And you know it. You feel it. Perhaps because you're living this very moment, or are about to provoke it. But be careful. Skipping a second of this video is like closing your eyes at the breaking point, where the male unconscious slips through the cracks of absence. Because here now, we will cross this void together. And in the end, you will never be the same. If this journey is touching you somewhere deep, that place where words don't reach, but truths burn, then subscribe to this channel. Because here, we don't just talk about feelings. We open them, name them, and traverse them. Sign up to never again lose yourself amid the silence of someone who never fully saw you. And who does he become when she's gone? Not on the surface, where everything still seems under control, but deep inside, where the sound of absence echoes like a dull drum, rhythming memories he can't name. Without her gaze, he returns to being what he always was before being seen. And perhaps this is the true abyss, realizing that much of what he believed himself to be only existed because she recognized him. A man without the woman who deciphered him is like a lost text in a dead language. The meaning fades. The world loses its sound. In her absence, everyday life becomes a musicless repetition. The cup remains in the same place, but the coffee no longer tastes good. The commitments continue, but something about them rings hollow. He sees himself, for the first time, without a mirror. Because it was she who returned the reflection of what was still human in him. And now, what's left? Automatism? The escape? The vain attempt to rediscover himself in other voices, other bodies, other distractions that only deepen the emptiness that began with her silence? Nothing exposes a man's emotional fabric more than what he tries to do with the space she left. He believed himself strong, independent, immune. But it is in her absence that the illusion cracks, that the fantasy of control crumbles. And then something primitive, forgotten, ancestral emerges. A longing that isn't just for her, it's for his own capacity to feel. Because while she was gone, he could hide in comfort. But now, naked before himself, he discovers he no longer knows how to communicate with his own soul. Her absence isn't the absence of the other. It's the absence of himself. A brutal disconnection from his essence. And that is terrifying. The attempt to move on becomes a silent theater. He posts, he leaves, he laughs. But there's something in her eyes that betrays. She still lives in the voids between the sentences. Her name lingers where no one sees, like emotional dust that time doesn't sweep away. And when everything falls silent, when night falls, the body lies down, and the world slows down, that's where she returns. Not in presence, but in absence. And her absence is more real than the presence of many. Because what she carried wasn't just her body. It was the meaning, the rhythm, the symbol. She was the axis. And now he spins around nothingness. It's in this whirlwind of perceptions that the truth begins to burn. There's no longer any escape from what absence has revealed. The mask falls, not before her, but before the mirror itself. And perhaps he discovers, too late, that it was never about losing a woman, but about losing the chance to be a whole man in her presence. Leave in the comments something you saw emerge in someone after you left. What did your absence reveal? Because sometimes, what's unsaid is what screams the loudest. When a woman walks away, what he does with the void that opens is the key to who he is behind his appearance. Because emptiness is not just absence, it is provocation, it's the wound that demands to be looked at, the mirror that forces confrontation. And there, between the pain of loss and the freedom of detachment, it reveals the rawest root of its character. Some rush to fill it in, like someone covering a mirror with a random sheet, pretending the reflection never existed. Others distract themselves, numb themselves, as if ignored pain had an expiration date. But there are those who dive in, who face what remains, not to blame themselves, but to understand themselves. What they choose reveals whether the pain will become a detour or an awakening. This moment, seemingly invisible to the world, is a kind of unconscious ritual. They don't know it, but they are being summoned to cross a portal. And in this portal, there are no excuses, no distractions, no outsourcing. It is there that the ego screams and the soul whispers. They can surrender to another body, seeking in another skin the memory theirs no longer holds. They can repeat clichés, convincing themselves that it was their fault, that time heals all. But time doesn't heal what hasn't been felt. It only pushes under the emotional rug what will one day scream through the teeth of oblivion. What it seeks to fill the hole is the exact measure of how much it still refuses to look at itself. There is no neutrality in absence. Either it transforms it into self-knowledge, or it transforms it into repetition. It's the unconscious choice between going through the pain or living eternally running from it. Because what it does with the void speaks. It screams. And sometimes, in the way it tries to move on with life, it's possible to see that it's not whole. It's fragmented, in pieces that it took unintentionally. And it still hasn't understood. It's not about replacing. It's about integrating. Because no new presence will heal what absence left exposed. It didn't leave a space to be filled. It left a lesson to be understood. It's easy to say you love it when it's near, when the warmth of its presence soothes insecurities, when the trail of its perfume still lingers in the corridors of routine. But what happens when this warmth fades? When the echo of absence replaces the familiar voice? True love doesn't depend on constant presence. It endures distance, matures in absence, deepens in emptiness. If the feeling evaporates along with the woman who left, perhaps it was never love. Perhaps it was need, habit, projection. Absence is the most brutal and honest test of affection. Either it expands, or it reveals itself too fragile to survive outside its comfort zone. Many confuse attachment with love. Attachment needs presence to remain standing, like a fragile castle supported by daily conveniences. True love, however, is sustained by the invisible. In gestures that endure even without an audience, in memories that still pulsate even without a response, in emotional responsibility that doesn't disappear with the end of the story. The man who truly loves continues to care for what is no longer there, continues to honor the memory, even without guarantees of return. He doesn't love to have, he loves because he feels. And this, in the modern world, is almost revolutionary. In absence, the feeling that remains is what deserves to be called love. And if nothing remains but relief, distraction, or contempt, perhaps there never was true love, only the need for someone to fill an inner hole. She's gone, but what's left? Is there silence? Is there an invisible presence? Is there pain that points to something greater? Or just the uncomfortable emptiness of losing a reflection? When she leaves, what remains is more than a memory. It's a revelation. Her absence doesn't erase anything. It merely lifts the veil. And what remains when she's gone is the most intimate truth of what he truly felt. A woman's absence doesn't just reveal her absence. It reveals, above all, the hidden structure of the male ego. When she withdraws, what crumbles first isn't always the feeling. It's the illusion. The pride, the inflated security, the center of the universe role that many men assume without realizing it. She leaves, and suddenly he no longer knows who he is without her admiring eyes, without her presence validating his strength, without her affection softening his flaws. The pain he feels isn't just from the loss. It's from the fall. The fall of an internal empire built on the certainty that she would never leave. It's in this space that his ego begins to creak. Without her, the stage is empty. And with the stage empty, who is he when no one is watching? Does he miss her? Or is he angry at no longer being the center? His wounded ego tries to convince itself that everything is fine. It jokes, poses as if it's free, seeks distractions. But there's a hidden desperation in the rush to move on. Because what she took wasn't just her presence, it was the invisible role he played when he was by her side. She was the mirror where he saw himself better than he really was. And now, without that reflection, he must deal with his own real, raw, lonely image. Her absence lays him bare, the ego, and reveals the wounded child that has always lived behind the mature man. The pain isn't because she's gone, it's because he's lost the place where his self-esteem seemed intact. And, ironically, it's this pain that can begin a true process of reconstruction. If he has the courage to go through this collapse not as a victim, but as someone who finally sees. Because it's at the moment the ego shatters that the soul begins to speak. And maybe, just maybe, this absence wasn't a loss, but a liberation. Not for him to forget her, but for him to remember who he could be, without needing applause. When a woman is absent, an invisible, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly revealing movement begins. Emotional distance. And this distance isn't measured in kilometers, but in silence, in the absence of gestures, in the lack of real presence. It's in this interval that he begins to show who he truly is, not on the surface of his words, but in the root of his actions. Those who seek, those who make themselves vulnerable, those who try to understand what happened, and those who merely observe from afar, hoping that time will dissolve the discomfort without needing to move. Her absence acts like a magnifying glass. It magnifies what was disguised, revealing what he didn't want to face. The difference between those who love and those who have simply grown accustomed lies in this moment. Those who are emotionally involved, who respect the bond and recognize the woman as a living universe and not a satellite in their own orbit, cannot simply accept separation as something banal. They feel. They question. They seek. The man who only felt comfortable in the convenience of having her close tends to accept her absence as a comfortable pause, or even as a relief. But what does this say about the feeling that existed? True love is restless. It doesn't settle for silence. It reacts, even with fear, because it understands that losing a conscious woman is losing much more than companionship. It is losing a mirror of evolution. The way he behaves in this silent space between them is the most honest test of emotional connection. Its absence is an invitation to courage. And only those who still feel true accept this invitation. Those who merely observe from afar, without action, are choosing distance as a shield. Perhaps because they were never truly present. And this hurts. Because it is at this moment that many women realize they were emotionally alone even before they left. His body was there, but his soul no longer inhabited the space between them. And absence, instead of creating emptiness, only makes it impossible to ignore. Every absence imposes a choice, even a silent one. Time passes, messages cease, paths diverge, and then, faced with a lingering emptiness, life demands a definition. Will there be reunion or oblivion? This answer is not found in spoken words, but in the gestures that endure or dissolve over time. Because those who truly feel return. And he doesn't return out of defeated pride or unbearable loneliness. He returns because he realizes that the space she occupied is irreplaceable. The reunion, when it happens, isn't a return to the past, but a recognition of what never stopped beating. Forgetting, however, sets in slowly, like someone slowly closing a window. There's no explosive rupture, but a gradual abandonment. He begins to get used to the silence, life takes on a different rhythm, and, little by little, her image is erased, not from his memory, but from his emotional presence. This doesn't mean she never mattered. It means he chose to move on without reclaiming what was between them. Forgetting, in this case, is a form of escape. Instead of looking at the pain, he chooses to bury it. And in doing so, he loses not only the woman, he also loses the chance to transform himself with what she had awakened. Between the reunion and the forgetting lies the great revelation. Because those who reconnect aren't seeking to repeat what was, they're willing to build something new, with more awareness, more depth, more truth. But to do so, it's necessary to feel, to traverse, to mature. A man who doesn't allow himself this immersion rarely returns different. And those who return the same, don't really return. Absence, then, becomes definitive not because she closed herself off, but because he didn't know how to reopen. Reconnection requires more than longing. It requires real presence, vulnerability, and a heart willing to no longer run from itself. There are men who only discover how lost they were when she decides to leave. While she's there, even in silence, she anchors. Even in conflict, she guides. Her presence functions as an emotional compass, silent and subtle, guiding without controlling, sustaining without imprisoning. And it is precisely for this reason that her absence provokes an almost childish chaos. He no longer knows where to go. The woman, in her symbolic essence, represents the connection with instinct, with the invisible, with the soul. And when this bridge disappears, he finds himself facing an unknown terrain where everything is doubt, everything is noise, everything is disorder. She was the axis. An axis not in the sense of dependence, but of archetypal orientation, the figure that connects man to his sensitivity, to his humanity, to his feelings. Without her, he realizes he lived guided not by himself, but by the reflection she provided. She was the unspoken foundation of his emotional stability. And when she leaves, she takes not only her company, but also her balance, her sense of direction, the subtle reference he never knew how to name. Many men mistake this feeling for longing, but what they feel is vertigo. Their inner world spins, their senses fail, because the symbolic structure she supported has shattered. And it is in this vertigo that he has the chance, or the curse, to find himself. He can try to lean on others, seek new compasses, new centers. But no presence will be enough until he learns to sustain his own axis. Her absence forces him to confront his own internal disconnect. And, if he's honest, he'll see that it was never her who threw him off balance. She simply left the equation, and what surfaced was the instability that was always there, silent, disguised, but alive. Because a conscious woman doesn't become essential on a whim. She becomes essential because she awakens in him what he spent his entire life trying to forget. What does he do when no one is looking? This is perhaps the most important question a woman's absence can provoke. Because it's easy to maintain appearances while there are eyes watching, while there is expectation, while there is pressure. But when she leaves, and the stage empties, it is in this silent backstage that he reveals his essence. Does he continue to honor the history they lived? Or does he erase everything as if it never existed? Her absence becomes a fertile ground for the truth that only blossoms away from appearances. And often, what we see there isn't forgetfulness, it's omission. It's not coldness, it's cowardice. In the gestures he chooses to maintain or abandon lies the measure of his emotional maturity. A conscious man doesn't need an audience to remain whole. He doesn't undo, doesn't diminish, doesn't disdain what he built with her, even if life takes a different path. Because he understands that what they experienced was real and deserves respect, even if it's over. However, someone who rushes to erase his traces, who tries to erase every memory as if there were guilt in feeling it, is only exposing the discomfort he carries inside. It's easier to pretend nothing happened than to admit that her absence hurt more than he'd like to acknowledge. The absence, then, becomes a witness. An invisible presence that silently observes what he decides to do with everything they shared. There's no need for grand gestures. The choice is enough, to remain true even without applause, or to crumble in the absence of validation. And the response he gives, even if no one else sees, she will feel. Because every intuitive woman grasps what was unsaid, feels what was denied, recognizes what was silenced. In the end, absence demands no public reaction. She merely observes, with invisible eyes, who he is when he believes no one is watching. In the silence that follows absence, something remains, invisible and powerful, like the last note of a symphony echoing through the walls of time. This reverberation is not the end, but the beginning of a deeper listening, a call to look within, where shadows dance with light, and hidden truths find their place in the vastness of being. Absence reveals not only what was lost, but what was always present, hidden by layers of routine and distraction. And it is in this space of apparent emptiness that true awakening occurs, silent yet unshakable. By traversing this dimension, we discover that emptiness is not a hole to be filled, but a crack through which transformation breathes. The man and woman who move away are not just characters in a story that ends, but symbols in motion, archetypes that reflect the eternal dance between loss and reunion, between deconstruction and construction. And it is in this game of separation and connection that we learn the most difficult truth. That absence is, paradoxically, a presence that invites change, the expansion of what we believe to be our limits. The invitation that remains, then, is for us not to fear emptiness or the loneliness it brings. Let us look at absence as an opportunity to recognize what lies hidden beneath the surface of what we consider safe. Let us embrace pain as a silent teacher, revealing inner structures and awakening the courage to reinvent ourselves. Because what seems like an end is actually the impetus for a new beginning, a chance to rebuild not from loss, but from the awareness of what truly exists. It matters. If this awakening touched something within you, allow yourself to continue this journey with us. Like, comment on your experiences, and share this message with those who need to hear these truths that few dare to speak. Sign up to be part of a space where the silence between words is as important as what is said, a place for those who seek not only to understand, but to experience the depth of what it means to love, lose, and be reborn. Because here, every absence can be the prelude to the most powerful presence.